Imagine living your entire life as a slave. Every sunrise brings not the promise of a new day, but the certainty of another cycle of toil. The sun beats down, the dust fills your lungs, and the crack of the taskmaster's whip is the only rhythm you know. You are a number, a tool, one among a vast, faceless crowd building monuments for gods you do not worship and a king who does not see you. There is no freedom. There is no future. There is no escape. Hope is a dangerous luxury, a flickering ember almost extinguished by generations of servitude. Then, against all odds, one man appears. He was raised not in the mud pits, but in the gilded halls of your oppressors, a prince of Egypt. And he comes with an impossible message, a whisper that could ignite a revolution or lead to ruin, that freedom is coming. This is the story of Moses and the Exodus, a foundational epic of liberation, a testament to the enduring power of faith against impossible odds, and one of the most powerful stories of freedom in human history. Long before the Exodus, the Israelites lived in Egypt. Their story in this land began not with chains, but with an invitation. Fleeing a great famine, the patriarch Jacob and his family were welcomed into the fertile land of Goshen, a prosperous region in the Nile Delta. At first, they were honored guests, relatives of the high-ranking official Joseph, one of their own who had risen to incredible power. They thrived, their families grew, and their culture flourished under the protective wing of a friendly dynasty. But empires shift, dynasties fall, and memory is short. As generations passed, the Israelites' origins were forgotten. The new pharaohs who came to power knew not Joseph. They saw only a large, distinct, and rapidly growing foreign population within their borders. Their prosperity was no longer seen as a blessing to the land, but as a potential threat. Fear, stoked by political paranoia, began to fester in the heart of the Egyptian court. What if this group sided with an enemy? What if their loyalties lay elsewhere? Fear turned into oppression. A calculated strategy of subjugation was put into place. The Israelites were systematically stripped of their rights and forced into state-sponsored slavery. Their lives became an endless cycle of forced labor. They were tasked with building massive store cities for Pharaoh, Pithom, and Ramesses, monuments to the empire's glory built on the foundation of their suffering. The work was relentless, the conditions brutal. Taskmasters were appointed to crush their spirits, to break their will through exhaustion and pain. Yet the narrative tells us, the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. This resilience only deepened Pharaoh's fear, driving him to ever more desperate and cruel measures. A people who were once guests were now prisoners in the land that had saved them, their hope slowly eroding under the weight of mud bricks and the heat of the Egyptian sun. It is in this crucible of suffering that the story of Moses begins, shrouded in danger. Pharaoh, seeing his policy of hard labor failing to curb the Israelites' growth, escalated his tyranny to an unthinkable level. A horrific decree was issued. Every newborn Hebrew boy was to be thrown into the Nile. It was an act of state-sanctioned genocide, a desperate attempt to sever the future of an entire people. The river that gave Egypt its life was to become a grave for the Israelites' sons. But in the face of this terror, an act of defiant hope took place. One child survived. A Levite woman named Jochebed hid her son for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she placed him in a waterproof basket and set him adrift among the reeds of the Nile, entrusting his fate to the very waters meant to be his demise. In a turn of profound irony, the baby was discovered not by a soldier, but by Pharaoh's own daughter. Moved by compassion, she adopted the child, naming him Moses, which can mean to draw out, for she drew him out of the water. Raised in the splendor of Pharaoh's palace, Moses grew up living a paradox. He was a prince of Egypt, educated in the finest traditions of the empire. Yet he was born of a people enslaved by that same empire. He lived between two irreconcilable worlds, the privilege of Egyptian royalty and the hidden truth of his Hebrew heritage. This profound identity crisis, the tension between the man he was raised to be and the man he was born to be, would simmer beneath the surface for years. It was a conflict that would eventually erupt, forcing him to make a choice that would not only define his own life, but would ultimately shape the destiny of his people. After fleeing Egypt, Moses found refuge in the land of Midian, a vast and lonely wilderness. He shed his princely robes for the simple life of a shepherd, marrying and starting a family. For 40 years, the fire of his past seemed to have cooled into embers. He was no longer a prince, no longer a fugitive, but a man lost to history. One day, while tending his flock on the slopes of Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, Moses encountered something that defied explanation. He saw a bush that was engulfed in flames, yet it was not consumed. The fire burned, but the leaves did not blacken. The branches did not turn to ash. It was a paradox of nature, a sight so strange he had to turn aside to investigate. As he approached, a voice called to him from within the fire, a voice that knew his name. It was from this miraculous moment, this intersection of the natural and the divine, that a message came forth that would shatter his quiet life and change the course of history. The voice declared that the suffering of the Israelites in Egypt had been seen. Their cries had been heard. And now, the time for their deliverance had come. Moses, the shepherd, the exile, was to be the instrument of that deliverance. His commission was staggering. Return to the land he fled, stand before the most powerful man in the world, and deliver the divine command, "Let my people go." But Moses, the man who had once acted with impulsive fury, was now filled with doubt. He was no longer a prince, but a humble shepherd with a stammer. He questioned everything. "Who am I?" he asked. "That I should go to Pharaoh?" He questioned his ability to be a leader. He questioned whether the people would even believe him. He questioned the very mission itself, arguing that he was not eloquent, that he was slow of speech and tongue. He was a broken man, keenly aware of his own inadequacies. It's a profoundly human moment. The chosen leader is not a flawless hero, but a reluctant one, crippled by self-doubt. Like many great leaders before and after him, Moses had to confront his own fear and inadequacy before he could ever hope to lead others out of bondage. His journey to liberation had to begin with liberating himself from his own sense of powerlessness. With his brother Aaron at his side, Moses returned to the land of his birth and his exile. He walked back into the heart of the empire he had fled, into the very court where he was raised. He stood before the new Pharaoh, a man who may have been his childhood companion, now the embodiment of Egypt's absolute power. The confrontation was a clash of two wills, two worlds, two gods. The demand, delivered by this shepherd who appeared from the desert, was simple, audacious, and utterly revolutionary: freedom. But Pharaoh, considered a living god by his people, met this demand with scorn. "Who is the Lord," he asked, "that I should obey him and let Israel go?" To him, this was not a divine command, but an insult to his authority and a threat to his economy. He refused. And in his refusal, he didn't just deny their freedom, he intensified their suffering, ordering the taskmasters to provide no more straw for the mud bricks, forcing the people to gather it themselves while maintaining the same quota. His heart, the text says, was hardened. What followed became one of the most famous and dramatic sequences in all of biblical storytelling: the 10 plagues. These were not random disasters. They were a systematic dismantling of the Egyptian pantheon and the authority of Pharaoh himself. Each plague was a direct challenge to a specific Egyptian deity: the god of the Nile, the frog goddess of fertility, the mighty sun god Ra. From the river turning to blood, to the swarms of locusts, to the impenetrable darkness that fell over the land, each escalating catastrophe demonstrated that the power Pharaoh wielded was nothing compared to the power demanding the Israelites' release. It was a divine war of attrition, designed to break the will of a stubborn king and a powerful empire. After the 10th and most devastating plague, a broken Pharaoh finally relented. In the dead of night, the Israelites were not just allowed to leave, they were urged to leave. After 430 years, their bondage was over. They departed in haste, taking with them unleavened dough because there was no time to wait for it to rise. A vast multitude of men, women, and children walked out of Egypt, their faces turned toward a future they could barely imagine. But freedom did not come easily. The taste of liberation was fresh on their lips, but the shadow of their oppressor was long. Soon after their escape, Pharaoh's hardened heart hardened once more. Regretting the loss of his massive labor force, he mustered his army, his elite chariots and horsemen, and gave chase. The Israelites, meanwhile, found themselves trapped. Before them lay the vast expanse of the Red Sea. Behind them, the dust cloud of the fastest and most fearsome army on earth grew larger by the minute. There was nowhere left to run. Their newfound freedom seemed destined to be a fleeting dream, ending in slaughter on the shores of the sea. Panic and despair ripped through the people. Their cries turned against Moses. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? The story reaches its most dramatic, desperate moment. It is here, at the edge of annihilation, that the ultimate miracle occurs. As Moses stretched his hand out over the water, a great wind blew and the waters parted. The sea split in two, forming towering walls of water on either side, and a path of dry land opened where none existed before. On one side, the past, an army bent on their destruction. On the other, the future, an impossible path to safety. Crossing the sea was the climax of their escape, but it did not end their struggle. It was the end of their slavery, but the beginning of a far more complex journey. Freedom, they would soon learn, meant something new, something heavier than the chains they had left behind. Responsibility. They were no longer told what to do, where to go, or how to live. They were a free people, but what did that mean? The vast and unforgiving wilderness journey that followed became the crucible in which a nation of former slaves had to be forged into a new community. It was a journey that tested their faith, their patience, and their unity. They faced hunger, thirst, and external enemies. They grumbled, they rebelled, they longed for the familiar miseries of Egypt over the terrifying uncertainties of freedom. The Exodus reminds us that liberation from an external oppressor is only the first step. The far greater and longer challenge is learning how to live in freedom, how to govern oneself, how to build a just society, and how to live in covenant with one another and with the divine. Thousands of years later, the story of the Exodus still resonates with breathtaking power across cultures, religions, and generations. It has inspired countless movements for social justice and civil rights, becoming a powerful metaphor for struggles against tyranny everywhere, because it speaks to something universal and elemental within the human spirit. It is the story of the deep-seated desire to break free from oppression, whether it be political, social, or personal. It is the story of the courage required to follow an uncertain path toward a better future, even when the way is not clear. And it is the story of the profound and enduring belief that even in the face of insurmountable obstacles, even when trapped between an army and the sea, a path can open, and that even the most impossible journeys can lead to freedom.